We've been told time and time again to save water, but how best can we protect the sources of our water? Well, policy has been put in place for the legal protection of water resources. What does this mean? I'm joined by Samir Randera-Rees from the Water Source Areas Programme to share the importance of this milestone. Very good morning to you. What does this mean for our water supply?
Well, first I think we need to know what these water source areas are. They are very, very special places for South Africa, and I don't think that many people in South Africa really know that they exist or appreciate their importance to our lives. We've identified these areas along with many others, and they basically, 1 in every 2 drops of water in South Africa falls as rain in these areas. They make up just 10% of the land area of South Africa, but provide 50% of our water. And because these areas are up in the mountains and they receive so much rainfall, that's where our rivers start. And that basically they are the top of our water supply. And what happens there affects everything downstream. And when these areas, we haven't been fully aware of their importance for very long. Only since 2013 were they first identified. And back then we had to say, okay, well, now we know that these things are important. We know that they supply us with a lot of the water that we use in our major economies. We know that most of our irrigated agriculture relies on these areas. We know that a lot of our power stations rely on water from these areas. So for almost everything, we are reliant on this water. But we need to do something to make sure these areas are secured and protected. And we said, okay, the best thing to do is to secure them from a policy and legislation point of view, first and foremost. And because without a mandate from the government and without a legal mandate to protect these areas, it's very difficult to affect change on the ground. So since about 2016, we've been working with the Nedbank Green Trust and various other partners, including the Centre for Environmental Rights, to look at what kind of legal standing do these areas have. So we did a full legal review, and we found out that actually because they were quite a new concept, they didn't have much legal standing, but there were existing legal mechanisms that could be used to protect these areas, and there were also potentially new mechanisms that could be put in place to give these areas higher priority in terms of planning and better protection in terms of the activities that could happen there.
Okay, let me just ask you, so obviously this is fantastic news for us, and you highlighting areas that possibly, as you say, we didn't hear about. But what's going to threaten them at the moment? Is it mining activity? Is it deforestation? What's the problem there?
It's a whole host of things. Basically, what we as WWF are worried about in particular is what we call the ecosystem, the ecological infrastructure, which are the ecosystems that capture, that store, that clean, and that release the water back into the system. And this ecological infrastructure has to function well before it gets to the built infrastructure, which is the dams and the pipes, etc. And if it's not functioning well, it means that the quality of the water and the quantity of the water coming out of the water source areas is affected, and it affects everyone downstream. And in terms of what the threats are to that ecological infrastructure, it differs between each water source area. There are 22 of them, and each one has different threats. So, yes, you mentioned mining. Coal mining in many of the water source areas in Mpumalanga is a major threat, because coal mining produces acid mine water, which can often leak into the water systems. We have invasive alien trees that suck up a lot of the water in these areas, more than the indigenous vegetation. And because these trees are growing so rampant, they can actually suck up a significant amount of water.
Samir, we've run out of time, but I need to ask this, and briefly, if you will. So basically, this new policy, what will it do? Will it tackle those threats? So will it make mining companies more accountable? Just tell us very briefly how it'll work in that way.
Yeah, so there's various new legislation on the cards. The Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries is pushing a mandate to protect 11 out of the 22 water source areas by 2025. And they're still investigating what is the best legislative mechanism. But ideally, we would see these areas being given higher priority in terms of planning, that certain activities will be restricted or prohibited in the water source areas, and that these areas will be secured in the long term.
great. Samir, thank you.